Hello and welcome. I am Exit Light and this is my channel. Today we're going to do something a little different. I have been doing segments on haunted Texas, but for this one I did a little something different. I went to the haunted place to see it for myself. As a lot of you know from being here, I really enjoy history. I enjoy the combination of historical and haunted. And this place ticks both those boxes. So I took along my husband, made him my ghost hunting buddy, and this is where we went. It is called the Muncey Massacre and also the Muncey Incident. As you're going to see, the different names come with a little bit of twist on the history. So, in one part of the history, the Muncey Massacre, this is known as the last Indian massacre in Collin County, Texas. And the other one, the Muncey Incident, it will tell you that they're only calling it Native Americans because one of the survivors had said that that's who had attacked these people. But that through the years, as the story goes, it might have gotten lost, like the game of telephone. So they don't call it an attack by Native Americans. They call it the incident. So I'm going to tell you the story, both stories, so that you can hear both accounts. And I'm going to show you the photos that we took, my husband and I, along our way, and describe to you exactly where we are and what's happening. Before I get started, I'd like to ask you to please give this video a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed and you would like to be, please go ahead and do that. If you'd like to be notified when my content goes live, please go ahead and do that. So I'm going to tell you how this adventure started. I wanted to go to one of the places I could report on. Instead of looking up the history and everything on the internet, I wanted to go see it for myself. Now, this land where this is, there is a monument that shows where the massacre took place, and then there is a cross and a monument where it is a burial ground where the people who had been massacred, which include men, women, and a small 3-year-old child, were buried, and part of their homestead. So my husband and I got in our vehicle, and we decided to go. We looked at the maps, and we used our GPS to determine where it was. Now, the first one, which is the memorial for the massacre, was easy enough to find. The second one was much more difficult. Following the directions of where it was, we couldn't find it. And so we did ask for some help. We went to the Parks and Recreation, which thankfully was open on a Sunday. This is now part of the Parks and Recreation system. In fact, it has been turned into a bike trail. So, strangely enough, every day, dozens and dozens of people jog and bike right through the area where there was a massacre. Possibly an Indian massacre, possibly the last Indian massacre in Collin County, and they don't know it. There's a garbage can sitting next to it. There's a bench sitting next to it. And then there is the memorial, but you'd have to stop and read it, which I would imagine that perhaps if you're walking through, you might stop. But in general, if you're jogging or riding a bike, you probably don't pay much attention to it. So I talk a lot about, in my podcast, when we talk about historical places and how they're treated, I talk a lot about how strange it is to me to see some place like the Alamo that's been cut down to a tiny parcel of land, and all around it is tourist attractions, bars, Ripley's Believe It or Not, etc. And how strange it is to me that that's how we relegate history. And this, unfortunately, is one of those stories that you can now jog through without knowing the violence, the fear of what happened in that very spot. And after getting help from the Parks and Rec Department, what we found out was the burial area had been sold to a developer. So it's privately owned now. We were able to drop a pin to find out where it was, and sadly, it's fenced off. And what has been built is two large buildings of some sort that look very boxy and generic. But there's a lot of security. The gates, the fences around the building have a lot of security. A lot of cameras. They have motion detectors. There are signs to do not trespass, because over the fenced area was the burial site for this family, a family friend, a small child, a toddler, and the home they were building. So my husband and I were fortunate enough to be able to find the area. The cross is no longer there, or at least visible from where we were, but we could tell by the pin on the phone of where the location was. So we will be showing you that. We will be showing you the old wood used for the home, planks, hand planked from a tree, gray, rotting. We'll show you that it's in a very swampy, wet area. It had been in a spring, but it's very swampy right now, which could have something to do with the fact that it is winter in Texas, which also gives the strange effect to the area. It makes it very gray and stark. Makes the trees look almost skeleton-like. And add to that it's very still and very quiet. And the stream is very, very clear. There aren't a whole lot of streams that are very, very clear, so that you can see clear to the bottom of the stream bed in Texas, because a lot of streams run through clay water, so they're a little bit reddish or brown. But this is clear, and in this darkness you can hear the birds chirping, and you really get the understanding of when it wasn't modern times, there wasn't people around riding bikes or jogging by or cars, that the sound of what happened had to have traveled a great distance. It broke that silence. And it really gives you the feeling of stepping back in history. The starkness of the grass right now. There's 2 trees on the land where the massacre happened. 2. Otherwise, it's empty, flat grass. One is scary and shadowy and skeleton-like in its twisted way. Another is a fruit tree. And while we were there, its fruit had dropped to the ground, of course, because it's winter. And there were fruit of some sort. I couldn't tell what it was. Possibly grapefruit. Really hard to tell. Laying on the ground, decomposing around the area. Which adds to the stark, eerie dreariness of the place. To see that death and decay on that land. And the fact that there is nothing else. There's nothing else growing until there's a wall of trees that goes along the stream, the creek. And, there's wildlife in there. It's very interesting. And if you are in this area of Texas that we're investigating, I hope you stop by. See what kind of vibes you get. See if you feel the feelings. See if you catch anything on your film. Just, see what you guys think. And if you've ever been there, I would love it if you would leave a comment. Because this happened in the fall, the trees would have started to having been empty. They would be in that process. So it would look more like it does now than it does in the summer, which would be green and full of trees and etc. So this is the right time to take this little adventure, to really get that feeling and to see where they were buried and what that's like now. Haunting, really. And now I'm going to read to you the two accounts of what happened on that day of the massacre, or the incident. Here is what's written on the plaque near the Muncey incident in the park. The promise of free land offered by the Republic of Texas for the purpose of colonizing the unappropriated lands of the Republic resulted in conflicts with American Indians due to the encroachment on their way of life. The first Anglo-American to settle in the Plano area is believed to have been Mr. McBain Jameson, who received his conditional certificate, which is the land grant, from the Republic of Texas on January 2nd, 1840. The next family to settle in the area was that of Jeremiah Muncey, his wife, and 4 children. Muncey received his land grant on January 3rd, 1842. In 1844, Jameson, who was an older man, settled with the Muncey family near Rowlett Creek. The chosen site was situated next to the edge of the densely wooded creek near a spring. The Muncey family and Jameson reportedly were living in a temporary shelter, which they lived in while they began construction on their home. According to traditional accounts, in the fall of 1844, and you'll see when I read the official account from the city that they claim that it was the fall of 1834, I believe. Leonard Searcy, his son William Rice, and his son went on a hunting trip down the Rowlett Creek. They set up camp about 10 miles from their home, which is near the Muncey homestead. The next morning, when Leonard Searcy went in search of the Muncey family, he discovered a heart-rending sight. Mr. and Mrs. Muncey, their young child, who was 3 years old, and Jameson had been brutally murdered. The 3 Muncey boys were gone. It was later discovered that the 15-year-old boy had gone to another settlement to get provisions, but the 17-year-old boy and the 12-year-old boy were taken captive, and they were never seen again. There was evidence that the attack had occurred that morning only a few hours before Searcy's arrival. Believing the perpetrators might still be in the area, Searcy quickly returned to camp to warn the others. When he arrived, only the elder Rice was at camp, as their 2 sons had ridden off to go hunting. The 2 fathers immediately went in search for the boys, but they only found one. He had been brutally murdered, and that was Mr. Rice's son. They loaded his body onto a horse, and with no sign of young Circe, rode the 10 miles home. When they arrived, they found Circe's son already home. The younger Circe had been with Rice's son when they were attacked and told them the story of his narrow escape. A party of men were gathered to pursue the suspects who, quote, traveled fast and were not overtaken. The 2 missing Muncey boys were never heard from again, but remains believed to be that of the boys were later found on what was called the flats along the retreating trail. The true identity of the assailants was never known. Oral history attributes the attack to the American Indians on the basis of the young Circe boy's account of the death of the Rice boy. Such a confrontation would not have been unexpected for the incoming Anglo settlers, as they were taking away the homeland of the American Indians and threatening their existence. Nevertheless, we will never know the true story of who was actually involved, for the telling of this story from generation to generation has likely introduced assumptions and biases that do not reflect the original event. The Muncey incident, however, had no impact on the continuing influx of settlers, for Texas became a state in 1845, and Collin County was established the following year. Reputedly, the Muncey confrontation was the last violent episode between settlers and American Indians in this area. Nevertheless, as one account noted, it struck cold fear into the hearts of the early settlers, and they lived with this fear for years to come. Then there's the Collin County version, which they call it the Muncey Massacre. In the fall of 1843, Jeremiah Muncey and his family were massacred by Indians at their home in North Plano between Plano and Jupiter Roads on the south bank of Rowlett Creek. The Indians had camped upstream the night before. As they proceeded down Rowlett Creek, they came upon 2 boys hunting. The Rice boy was killed, and the Circe boy escaped. The Indians continued down the creek to the Muncey place. The Muncey home was a lean-to at that time that they were using while they constructed their future home. Jeremiah Muncey, his wife, a 3-year-old child, and a neighbor, McBain Jameson, were all killed. 2 of the Muncey boys were taken by the Indians and never seen again. The site of the massacre is marked, as well as the spot where the Munceys were buried. Leonard Circe and William Rice came to the Muncey hut. They found the brutally massacred bodies of Jameson, Muncey, Mrs. Muncey, and their small child. Recognizing the obvious signs of an Indian raid, Circe and Rice hurriedly left to find their own sons who were hunting in the area. Circe's son was safe, but Rice's son had been massacred. The victims are buried at this site. Although Indian raids continued well into the late 1800s and were fought by Texas Rangers, the Muncey Massacre was the last Indian raid in Collin County. So those are the 2 different accounts of what happened. I don't know if we'll ever know which count is accurate or most accurate, but I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you do, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in being subscribed, please go ahead and push that subscribe button. And if you'd like to be notified when my content goes live, please click that bell.